Welcome, everybody. Finally back to another Three Man Rush podcast live episode here on Twitter and on YouTube. I'm your host, Landon Oliver, here with my co host, Andrew Scott. Big Jared is away, but he will hopefully be back with us soon. But yeah, man, thank you guys so much for joining us. Been a heck of a few weeks here. It's lots been going down. We got some head coaching hires to talk about tonight. We got some Super Bowl happened. I mean, that's pretty big thing, right? Super Bowl.
Yeah. I think they call it the big game. So I think that's what we're supposed to call it on YouTube to not get banned.
Oh wow!
But
Look, if the NFL finds us in the depths of YouTube just to ban us, I don't know if we're
I
that
hope
big time just yet.
I hope they give us a little boost before they ban us. So that way when we make our
Yeah,
comeback, we can really come back. But it's like
yeah.
the NFL draft is like, or the Super Bowl is like mixed feelings for me because I'm so sad that the NFL season's over. But then again, I'm really excited because then it's draft time, it's free agency time, it's time to talk about the coaching changes that we're going to talk about today. Like there really is no such thing as an off season with the NFL. So it's like
No,
the
especially not in my house. I mean, it's pretty much football 365 days a year, and I know that can get a little old at some point, but it's what's funny is the Super Bowl ends, and like now this is whenever I actually start to get pretty busy uh,
right.
with football. So it's pretty funny how the season ends for some, and then for others, this is just the start. So
Yeah, this is really grind time for me too. So I feel what you're saying. It's kind of a this is really the first year that I've really, I guess, dedicated myself to the off season grind as much as I'm going to be this year. It's going to be a new level for me, but I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know we got combines around the corner. You going up to Indy?
more than likely, yeah, your boy will be
Yeah,
up there for sure. Uh, and then we'll see what happens with the draft as well. Could possibly be there at the draft for Kansas City. So
Ooh,
yeah, we'll
Kansas
see how.
City's really gonna be going crazy now.
Oh yeah, it'll be a fun time for sure up there. So yeah, it just kind of depends on how the schedule ends up. And I know I've reached out also to about some pro days, possibly going to UK's pro day for Will Levis and see what happens too with
Yeah,
Tennessee. Tennessee's pro day. There's some guys there, so just possibly hitting the little surrounding areas, just
right.
for an afternoon for that. So, yeah, man, it's a lot involved. Actually, just got back from Mobile just a couple weeks back, so was down there at the Senior Bowl. Had a great time, and yeah, I mean, this like I said, this is when all the work starts right now. So I'm excited to get to it, though, man.
Absolutely, man. Well, before we close the book on the 2022-2023 season, let's talk about that big game. Let's talk about the Eagles and the Chiefs, man. What were your, initial reactions, thoughts now that we've had time to process everything, get all the reactions out there. What were your thoughts on the game?
Well, I mean, it was a really good football game, and that's pretty much all you could ever ask for, especially at a game of that magnitude. You had both number one seeds, pretty much both the favorites, going into the year. At least for some, I know Kansas City was a big favorite going into the season in Vegas, which is kind of funny to hear Travis Kelsey say nobody believes in us whenever like dude, like you were like top three and like in Super Bowl odds. So yeah, I mean, I don't know about any of that, but hey, I guess if you need motivation, it obviously worked for you. So,
Yeah,
uh, yeah, but yeah, man, it was a good game, and quarterback play was really strong on both sides, which I don't think there was ever a doubt that that was going to be the case. The offensive line play was phenomenal on both ends as
yeah,
well. Uh, Defenses, if you liked defense, this was probably not a great game for you to watch, but if you like good quarterback play, good offensive line play, offense, and then if you're a big fan also too of just some flags thrown at the end of the game, you're gonna be a big fan of this one too. So that's always that's always the fun part of the Super Bowl because you tweet like I think I said a tweet out what it happened. I was like, you knew it was coming. Like And it has nothing to do with the two teams too. It's just like there's no way the referees and Carl Sheffers on that big of a stage were not going to make their presence known. Like they wanted you to know they were there.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole reason we're watching the game anyway. As everyone
Yeah,
knows. So, um,
it's all about
but
them.
yeah, Bills were the favorite. That's why they took offense. I mean, at one point in the year, the Bills were the favorite. I don't really have any problem with Kelsey, even if he's just creating the narrative in his head for the sake of motivation. I really don't care where it comes from. I mean, there is no doubt that at the beginning of the season, I had my concerns. I'll be the first one to say it. I still picked them to make it to the playoffs and things like that. I didn't think they were going to fall off a cliff, but I was concerned to see how that offense would react to not having Tyreek. There was not going to be a fuck it, Tyreek's down there somewhere ball anymore. This season, and that's something that we hadn't really seen. And
No, now we
throughout the
just got
year,
we just got fuck it. Travis Kelsey's wide open
yeah,
everywhere
yeah,
on the field. That's
yeah. Fuck
those
it,
are the balls
Kelsey's
we get
Kelsey's
now.
open in the middle of the field. I'll just throw it to him. Um, so I was super, super impressed with how the Chiefs offense developed throughout the year. Um, the way, I mean, most teams in the league, most of the elite offenses in the league, they're doing it with not one, but multiple top receivers. And, we all know that the Chiefs' top receiver is Travis Kelsey, but they still don't have really that consistent outside presence and things like that. Like an AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, like a T Higgins and Jamar Chase. A lot of these elite offenses have these outside guys, and you know what? The Chiefs, they've got Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Travis Kelsey. And how does he get so open every time? Andy, Andy is something else, man. That's really about all I've got for that one. Kelsey is a very gifted route runner as well. I mean, he does not make it everybody is a mismatch for Kelsey. The corners aren't big enough, the linebackers aren't fast enough, and Andy Reid is a mastermind at what he does. I don't know if you want to add some more onto that, but he truly is open every time.
Yeah, he's just constantly open. Um, yeah, well, I mean, it's a combination of one, like the chemistry between the quarterback and the tight end. Like they know where each other is going to be at all times, even if it's not part of the route. I mean, if he breaks off, it's just the connection between those two is fantastic. And then of course you have Andy Reid who just he'll consistently move him in different spots along the offensive line to get him in one-on-one situations, which is a big part of it. Is just game planning and knowing where to attack a defense. So you'll see Andy Reid, you'll see him, line up inside, line up outside, line up in the slot, line up, in a nub roll. Like you'll see him line up all over the field, and he gets himself into one-on-one situations. And then once he's in one-on-ones, he just wins because he's that good of a
He
player.
does.
So yeah, I mean, to me, like that was always like that was never a question. I mean, like was Tyreek Hill like a big thing? Like yeah, for sure. But I always thought like their number one, they never lost their number one receiver.
No, no, I agree with that. Um, and this was another thing. To run the corn dog twice and kill it both times. He literally, it's kind of like whenever you play Madden and a play works, you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna flip the play and see if it works again. That's basically what they did out there on the field. They did it once to Tony, just flipped the play, did it the opposite way to Sky Moore, and it worked both times. And so I mean, it's one of those things like if you want me to stop doing it, then you got to stop me. And they didn't
Yeah.
stop him. So I don't blame him for running it twice. Andy,
No, and the Eagles, yeah, and the Eagles too. Like even going into that game, like they got with that play earlier in the season against Jacksonville. So I mean, like
right.
there's history of teams doing that to them throughout the season, and they never adjusted. So I think it was a fantastic offensive game plan by Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid.
Yep.
That's another guy like Eric Bieniemy doesn't get enough credit for what he does in
No.
that offense, and it's a shame. Once again, here we are through the coaching cycle. He still doesn't have a head coaching job, um,
I don't
but
know if that dude
you
is
know,
just like I don't know if he's just an awful interview. Like I don't know if he just like bombs the interview process whenever he gets in the room for these coaching jobs or what? Because it makes no sense why he doesn't
Yeah,
have a head coaching job yet.
yeah, and people like my thing with it too is like people point to like, well, he doesn't call the plays. And it's like, well, neither did Matt Nagy. Well, neither did who else was it? There was Matt Nagy and there was somebody else that got hired as a head coach. Um,
Yeah, I can't think of it. I
it
mean,
might have been
there's been
Doug
plenty.
Peterson. I don't think Doug Peterson called the plays under Andy Reid either.
There's been plenty of guys under Sean McVay that hadn't called plays either, and they have had no problem finding head coaching jobs.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think I think
So
McVay has taken somewhat, or at least at points has taken step backs on that and stuff too. But it's like I don't. Oh yeah, here you go. Sirianni.
no, well,
Um,
Sirianni came from Indianapolis.
right.
Um, yeah, so he
He
didn't
has
call
to
the
be the
plays under.
successor in KC. So I mean,
Yeah,
if
so
I'm being me, that's what I'm holding out for at this point. Like I'm just gonna ride this out with Andy and see if I could just step in and take over from there. I don't know if that's
which
something
he's a
that
free agent. This he only signed a 1 year deal this last offseason. So his
right.
contract expired. So who knows if he even comes back to KC. I mean, I would imagine they'd love to run it back again, but I mean, in this league, you never know. So he could possibly be looking to prove himself out of the shadow of Andy Reid
I was
and
gonna say
Patrick
it
Mahomes. So
might be enticing for him to take an OC job somewhere where the head coach is more defensive minded and he gets the credit he deserves for the offenses and assuming it does well. I think he could parlay that into a head coaching job. If the big thing, if the big cloud over him is indeed that he's the offensive coordinator for Andy Reid, and people aren't wanting to give him enough credit for the effect he has on that offense. Maybe he does want to go to a team where he has more of the more of the blame and more of the credit for the offensive success. I don't know, but it's very strange to me that he hasn't landed a head coaching job yet.
yeah. Well, before we get into other head coaching stuff, I want to get your thoughts on the Super Bowl because I talked about it a little bit. I didn't hear what you thought of it.
Number one, it was an incredible game. It was much less stressful than last year's Super Bowl for me. Not quite as fun, not having a team in the fight, but I was able to just kind of sit back and enjoy the incredible football that was being played. It was disappointing to see, and this isn't an excuse for either team because they both were playing on the same field, but it was disappointing to see defensive players slipping, trying to get traction. And, I think that play, that the offensive line for the Chiefs deserves a ton of credit for how well, they play. But I do think that partially hurt the Eagles' pass defense, and that was kind of disappointing. You don't like the weather element isn't there. They're in Phoenix. Everything's beautiful. Like you would think we're all on an even playing field, and they are still technically on an even playing field because they both had to deal with it. But it's just unfortunate to see something like that affect the game on both sides of the ball. Um, but outside of that, I was just so impressed with Jalen Hurts. Just the way that he put the Eagles on his back, man, just blew me away. And we on this show we've been Hurts believers for a few years now. Like there's a lot of things that have made me look dumb over the years, but Jalen Hurts has made me look very smart over the years. And so
Yeah, yeah.
it made
Going
me
back to
so
college,
happy.
yeah,
Yeah, it made me so happy to see him play so well on that big stage. The fumble was unfortunate, but in typical Jalen Hurts fashion, he stepped right back up, shook that off, didn't let him affect him a bit, and just went right back to work. So I love seeing him play so well. Unfortunate for him that he wasn't able to cap that in a win with how well he played. Um, but I think that the biggest thing for me was just that those two teams played so well, and we'll get into. I'm going to save some other thoughts on the Eagles' defense for the coaching portion of whatever we talk about because I've got a question for you about a certain Eagles defensive coordinator that just landed a head coaching job today that we'll talk about in a little while. But yeah, overall, just an extremely entertaining game and two offenses that did exactly what we thought that they would do. It's tough to be mad at either of those defenses for not being able to stop those offenses, and the two MVP candidates doing MVP things. Um, and Mahomes gutting it out, with dealing with that injury and still coming out as playing as well as he did in the second half. Uh, just we are very blessed as football fans to have these guys to watch now and for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. These two teams, man, like both these guys are still young. Both their teams are still really good. Like, I mean, it's going to be interesting with the Eagles, between losing both of their coordinators to see how that ends up shaking out. But there's no reason to think that these guys are going anywhere anytime soon. So yeah, two awesome players, awesome teams, and it was an awesome Super Bowl. I was really excited about it, and yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. Another
That's all
season in
there
the
is
books.
to it. Yeah. Now we get to decide who's going to be in the Super Bowl next year for the next, however many months.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Oof. There's a lot to go on before then. But before we start that, there were some coaching hires that took place as well, and this is going to determine wins and losses going into next season, and how well some of these teams play, how well some of these younger guys that are going to be drafted here in the next few months develop. This is the start of careers, and there's some retreads that happened. We'll start off first with Sean Payton going to the Denver Broncos. That was pretty interesting because everybody kind of had him, pegged for wanting to wait for the Dallas job or the Los Angeles job. Should
Right.
Brandon Staley have gotten fired, which is something else that didn't happen. But I mean, it was kind of interesting to see him. To hear the rumors of like, well, these are the two jobs he wants. If not, he'll just go back to TV. But then he ultimately ends up in Denver. And, at the end of the day, money talks, and nobody has the pockets that the Denver Broncos ownership has right now. And, if you didn't know, they're the owners of Walmart. So they're,
They're
they've
good.
got they got some deep pockets up there in Denver for sure. So once they threw that, $20 million a year his way, I mean, it's hard to say no to that.
Right. Uh,
So
Real quick, so my allegiance lies with the now Los Angeles Rams. That was probably the saddest part of the Super Bowl this year for me, was that I could no longer say that my team was the reigning Super Bowl champions. But been a Rams fan since I was a kid. I'm a St. Louis sports fan first and foremost, but growing up a St. Louis sports fan, growing up a Rams fan. Whenever they moved back to LA, I guess. To me, it was just moving to LA because they were, by the time I got into football, they were already in St. Louis. But uh, I couldn't abandon them whenever they moved back to LA. So I'm still a Rams fan. So we won't talk about this season as far as the Rams go. That has already been erased from my memory. It never happened. Uh, but yeah, I'm a Rams fan, so I'm hoping for a bounce back season. But yeah, so Sean Payton. I mean, so what are your thoughts on this? Let me ask you this: as far as the Saints' success goes, whenever Sean Payton was there, do you think it was, well, Sean Payton had a Hall of Fame quarterback? Do you think it was, Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback, partially because Sean Payton was his head coach? Like, where is it a 50-50 split? Do you lean one way versus the other? Because we really haven't seen, like, at least in recent memory, we haven't really seen Sean Payton without Drew Brees by his side. And the Russell Wilson we saw last year is a far cry from the Drew Brees that Sean Payton had last time he was coaching. Um, so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that, and then how, will Sean Payton be able to turn the mess that was the Broncos offense around?
well, I mean, like with all things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It always takes a great quarterback to win in the league. I mean, that's just the way it's always been. And
Yeah.
at the same time, it takes a great play caller to.
Cheers, Andrew.
Oh, appreciate you tuning in, bro. Uh, love you too. Uh, but I mean, it always takes a great coach to get the most out of a great quarterback. And
Right.
at the end of the day, though, you still have to have a great quarterback to win ball games. So it kind of lies somewhere in the middle. I think they were very much, equal each other's success. I mean, very much kind of like the Belichick Brady, pairing, or um, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I mean, you benefit from all that. Really, the only player that I can remember consistently winning without like great head coaches was probably Peyton Manning.
The
I mean, he
fact that
went through.
he kept Adam Gase's career afloat for so long is just
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
yeah. Well, I mean, like, there's more than that, but I mean, like, like this dude, he went to the playoffs, or I think he went to four Super Bowls with four different head coaches.
Yeah, it's
Like,
crazy.
that's absurd. So, um, so yeah, I mean, but outside of that, no, I mean, uh, it's gonna be tough because really last season with Nathaniel Hackett didn't work out, obviously, but there was a lot of blame to me that went on the quarterback, and like rightfully so. Like there was a lot of stuff that like was pretty like well designed plays, that guys got open on, and the quarterback was just bad. Like it's just bad quarterbacking. So you know, it could be a combination of multiple things. Russ was in a new city for the first time in his career. He's having to adjust. He's having to
Right.
throw to new wide receivers. He's got to learn a whole brand new system with a new team. I mean, like there's a lot that goes into stuff like that. But we'll see how Sean Payton can come in and possibly make things a little bit easier, because I think that's one thing that Sean Payton has always done really well is he's always kind of made things easy for the quarterback, whether it was making the correct reads, or and that's not taking anything away from Drew Brees, because obviously you still got to go out and execute. But it was very much in like the Andy Reid role, where I mean, like as long as you throw to where you're supposed to throw to, more often than not, that guy's going to be open.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if Russ can just get back to playing smart ball, not turning the ball over, which is something that he had a huge problem with this year, playing in rhythm, not really having to create like he's had to create basically throughout his whole career, because I think a lot of it was he just kind of lost the step. He's getting up there now. What is he, 33, 34 years old? He's not going to be able to move like he was when he was 28. And a
Right.
lot of those plays you saw where he was trying to create, spin out of the pocket, and do all those things we saw in Seattle for so many years, he was getting tracked down from, defenders, or he wasn't able to get his base set and throw an accurate ball. And that's stuff he's going to have to clean up, and stuff he's going to have to learn as he gets older. But hopefully, have it with somebody like Sean Payton, who is used to having a quarterback that's 5'11", 6 foot, six. He's used to having somebody like that with Drew Brees.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, I think he understands what needs to be done. I think he's going to clean up a lot over there as far as the culture goes. I mean, he's very
Yeah.
no nonsense. He's going to command a lot of respect in that locker room immediately. He's a guy that's been there and done that, and from the success he's had that if you trust him, and you trust what he's telling you, and you execute the game plan he puts forward, more often than not, you're going to be put in a situation to win a ball game. So I think that's going to be a big thing for them, and I'd love to see them bounce back.
Yeah, I would too, man. I mean, I've always been somewhat of a Russ apologist, which is weird because he played played with one of the Rams'
Yeah,
biggest rivals for so many years. But I don't like. I just I hate seeing guys get piled on just because it's the cool thing to do on the internet. I feel like Russ really got some unfair
oh
treatment
yeah,
last year. And great, like he didn't really do himself any favors.
no,
And I'll admit that. And
he's
I
a
think
he's
he
an
almost
odd dude,
leaned.
man.
I think he leaned into it to an extent, which I appreciate.
Yeah, oh, I'm
But
sure. That's what I feel like about Aaron Rodgers too, because people get
oh yeah,
so bent
Rogers
out of
knows what
shape
he's
over
doing.
Aaron Rodgers. And I just have to, I tell people multiple times, I'm like, he's just trolling y'all, right? Like y'all are so
Right.
worked up, and he's doing it on purpose, and I think it's
Yeah.
hilarious that
Yeah.
people take it
Absolutely.
so
Yeah. He
seriously.
loves to get a rise out of people.
Yeah,
Um,
and so I think Russ was kind of the same way, like you said. I think he saw some like the Danger Witch and all that kind of funny stuff. Like,
yeah.
bro, you that dude is really smart. You can't possibly tell me he didn't know he was messing
Right.
with all y'all. Come on.
Exactly. And I still believe that there's something left in there. I don't think he's completely cooked. Now he's not going to be, the Russ we saw at the end of his time, not the very end of his time in Seattle, but those last few years in Seattle. I don't think he'll get back to that level by any means. But I still believe in the weapons that are there. I love Jerry Jeudy. I'm a huge Jerry Jeudy fan. Cortland Sutton is legit. KJ Hamler. Um, I like those guys. Hopefully Jamonte Williams is able to bounce back from his injury. I know I'm pretty sure his injury was similar to J.K. Dobbins, and we saw kind of the brutal timetable that came with that. So hopefully his turns out better than that. But um, I still think there's something left. I don't think it's as bad as we saw last year in terms of Russ's play. And I really, for so many of the reasons that you named, I really don't think there could have been a better hire for Russ than Sean Payton with with Drew Brees, the size and comparisons and things like that. I think are good points, and uh, I think that better days are ahead for Russ, and he'll be somebody that I'll be rooting for, just because of the whole him getting piled on and things like that. And whenever at the end of the season, toward the end of the season, whenever he was really getting piled on, and I saw like Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler come to his defense online, then I know like that's my quarterback. Stuff that they didn't have to go out of their way to say. Like they could have just stayed quiet, they could have just ignored it or whatever. But they stuck their neck out for him. It's like that kind of stuff lets you know like it's probably not as bad as the public is trying to paint it out to be. So I'm not going to come out and predict them to leapfrog the Chiefs and win the division next year or anything like that. But I also don't think it's going to be as ugly as we saw this past year either.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's get into our next one here. We had, I believe, the second hire that took place was D'Amico Ryans going over to, or no, the first hire that took place, Frank Reich moving over to Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Frank Reich moving over to Carolina, going back to his roots. He was the first quarterback to throw a touchdown pass for the Carolina Panthers. If you did not know that, whenever they had their expansion franchise and they just became a new team, Frank Reich was first quarterback on the roster, and he threw the first touchdown pass in Carolina Panthers history. So now he's going over there as the head coach. And coming from Indianapolis, I'm super excited for Frank. I knew he would get another shot. I thought he deserved another shot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, the staff that he's already putting together over there is phenomenal. Like they had, I believe, Jiro Evero, who was in
Mm-hmm.
consideration for some head coaching gigs. He was the Denver Broncos offensive coordinator last year. Worked previously, of course, with the Rams. I know you're familiar with him.
Defensive
And
coordinator, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
did I say offensive coordinator?
Yeah. I figured you
Yeah,
just got
see,
your words mixed up because I know
yeah,
that you know where he's at. I
yeah,
just
yeah. So
for
he's
the
the
people
DC.
that are listening, I don't want them to be confused.
Yeah, no, no, good catch. But I was gonna say their senior offensive assistant though just hired earlier today, Jim Caldwell, going back over there, more experience, and they've got another few guys on there that are just phenomenal positional coaches. They're going to bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to this team, and it's really
Yeah.
almost like the exact opposite of what they had under Matt Rule, or first time NFL head coach, hired a lot of assistants that weren't necessarily experienced in the NFL, anything like that, and we kind of saw that fail. So now, obviously they're overcorrecting, and they've got some extreme veteran leadership now coming into that coaching staff, and
I
it's
saw I
it's
saw
exciting.
something on Twitter the earlier today that the average experience, like the average years of coaching experience on this staff is 14 years.
That's absurd. That's absurd.
Absurd. But yeah, I'm gonna throw this up here real quick because I think that this will kind of lead me into a point I want to make. So as you said, he loves Frank, thought he had to go in Indy, but also thought he was actually a coach. So it did seem like bridges were kind of burnt in Indy, and that even if Frank wasn't completely to blame, that Indy kind of needed a fresh start, and he had to go. I didn't feel like he got a fair shake at things completely. And typically, I'm not a fan of head coaches being recycled, but Frank was one of the guys that as soon as he got fired, I was like, man, I hope he ends up getting another shot because I feel like he didn't get a completely fair go at it. And if Frank gets him a quarterback, especially a rookie quarterback that he can develop with this staff that he's put together with the defensive coordinator. Deuce Staley's another guy I really like that he brought on the offensive side with him. Um, the Colts fans that were like really adamant that he needed to go and like didn't like Frank and things like that. I don't think they're
Yeah,
going to be very. I don't think they're going to be very happy to see the success that I think Frank will have in Carolina if he gets that quarterback. Because I mean, they invested in the offensive line both through the draft and free agency last year. Still could use a little bit of work, but they've got pieces on the offensive line. They've got DJ Moore. They've got a solid defense, and now they've got a really experienced coaching staff in a division that's going to be wide open next year. We'll see what happens with the draft, and we'll see what happens with these free agent quarterbacks. Because I mean, right now, if you look at the projected starting quarterbacks in the NFC South, it's it's pretty ugly.
yeah, yeah,
So
not
that
good. So I mean,
division's
like, yeah, you've
open
got,
for the taking, though.
yeah, it
So
definitely is. No, I mean,
it,
yeah, like really, like so the only thing, so the only thing I will say that Frank, the mistake that basically cost him his job was, and I know this has been recycled. I know we've talked about it, which I don't know if me and you have talked about it, but I've talked about it on other shows. I've talked about it, just with people just, texting and just chilling around. But so the 2021 draft is coming up. Philip Rivers just retired. Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay wanted to draft their quarterback. They wanted to finally go young. They were targeting Justin Fields in that draft. That was their guy. Justin Fields was their guy. Frank Reich fought his ass off to get Carson Wentz in Indianapolis,
yeah,
and he basically ended up actually going over Chris Ballard. And yeah, yeah, it was, yeah. So he actually ended up going over Ballard and convincing Ursay, like, look, you give me this guy, I can win with him. He's our answer, not just for now, but for the future. That was going to be
right.
the quarterback of the future because at the time he's only 28 years old. So so yeah, so basically Ursay said, okay, well, you've had success with all these other quarterbacks. I'll get you your guy. And he basically told Ballard, like, hey, this is the direction I think we need to go in. We need to go get Frank his guy. They did that, and you saw how it played out. So he lost a lot of trust with ownership. Um, once that fizzled out, and to the point to where he actually apologized personally to ownership and Chris Ballard for bringing Carson Wentz into the fold. So yeah, yeah. So that was pretty much once he made that move, and it cost them Justin Fields and and the ability to go young, and then of course since they made that move, they've been on this quarterback carousel going between Carson Wentz, obviously, then Matt Ryan, then Sam Ellinger, then Nick Foles, then back to Matt Ryan. I mean, it's just been a disaster pretty much ever since that trade happened. And I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back there for Frank. And that's
Yeah,
unfortunate because he was a very good coach. And I still think he is a very good coach. And I think he's going
I
to have a
agree.
lot of success as long as they don't let him have personnel say, because Carson Wentz is going to be a free agent. So
Oh,
you
brother.
know, yeah, yeah, you never know. And to this to this comment here, the last couple years, Frank Reich also like they were big Derek Carr fans as well. So
Mhm.
I could see a path forward for him to finally end up landing Derek Carr because discussions were had even going back to this past offseason before the Matt Ryan trade about Derek Carr and
Right.
the price the Raiders wanted. I believe they wanted 2 first-round picks, and yeah, so obviously they're not going to do that deal. So they pretty much just hung up the phone and they were like, okay. But yeah. Hey, anytime I get a chance to plug Carson
I'll
Wentz, I do,
say
man.
this, man. I hope unless for some reason Aaron Rodgers comes out of his darkness retreat and is like my vision told me I need to be a Carolina Panther. I hope they don't go the veteran quarterback route. It might take some trading up in the draft to go get the rookie they want, but if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come from his slumber and want to be a Carolina Panther, I hope that that's the route they go. I hope they avoid the whole veteran quarterback thing. Hopefully, Frank is tired of these veteran quarterbacks at this point. Um, And I hope they trade up and go get their guy, whoever that may be. Whether it's Stroud or Levis or Bryce Young.
Oh, oh,
Anthony
yeah, I don't hope they
Richardson.
trade up too high. I don't want to trade up too high.
Yeah, obviously you don't want them to leapfrog the Colts, um, but yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see Frank build up a young quarterback, and I feel like they have the veteran staff to be able to do so now with all this experience on the staff they have. They can afford to have young players in the building because I think the culture and the leadership is going to be there between some of the players they already have on the roster, plus the coaching staff that's coming in. I think that's a nice little recipe for a rookie quarterback to come in and see success. It's not the dysfunction that you try to stay away from for a rookie quarterback. So I would like to see them go that route. Rather, that's what happens. Remains to be seen. But
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree, and I do think they end up going that route. I think they go get a rookie. I know they like uh, Will Levis and C.J. Stroud has kind of been the names that I've seen kind of come up with Carolina multiple times. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's possible one of those two guys end up landing there, but yeah, yeah, I think Frank wants a rookie. I think ownership in Carolina wants a rookie. Like they want their franchise quarterback in the draft that they can build around, for the foreseeable future. I think Frank has kind of learned his lesson on the vet route. So, for better or for worse, it basically got him fired. So, yeah, I think he's going to go full in. I think that team's going to go full in on a rookie. And yeah, I expect it probably to be one of Levis or Stroud, I would imagine, or it's probably going to be in the guy in Carolina. But there's a lot that can go on between now and then, so we'll
yeah,
see. Yeah, I don't want you coming. Like, believe me, if it happens, I'll post this clip. But if it doesn't happen, I don't want you coming back on here and being like, "Well, you told me it was going to be this." Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you never know. But yes, let's get into our next head coach. And that was the next head coach hired. Here was D'Amico Ryans going to the Houston Texans, going back home. For him as well, another former player now
it's pretty cool.
coaching coaching a team, which to me is kind of like that's been my biggest worry. All the last 35 days is a former great player coaching your team. But it seems to be working out, of course, for Carolina. It seems to be working out now for Houston, grabbing D'Amico Ryans, who once again is now looking to terrorize the AFC South like he did for so many years as a linebacker. And yeah, I mean, I think this is also, there were a few guys that were at the top as far as like most coveted head coaches, and he was one of the few names across the league that was just like very coveted for a head coaching gig. And obviously, you see why with what he's done with that San Francisco defense, and the motivation, the type of leader he is, the type of teacher he is. That's a thing that
Right.
comes up a lot with him is the word teacher. And I think for a team that is going through a clear rebuild, um, this is a team that they don't have direction. They don't have a lot of great pieces. I mean, they're fully embracing, a rebuild, and they're building for the future. And so I think if you can get somebody that first and foremost is a great leader of men, but also a great teacher, I think that's the route you should kind of go with. And I love this hire for Houston. Unfortunately, I think this is a really good hire for them. Obviously, it's still a players' league, so as great as the coach is, you're only going to be as good as the players you have on the field. And so
Hmm.
they'll have to, draft talent. They'll have to surround him with talent, and that's something that they've kind of struggled with, over the last few years. But I think there's a path forward there for success if they can get their, once again, it's another team looking for a quarterback, and
Yeah.
they really only have to worry about somebody leapfrogging them for number one because they're sitting at number two, and they can just kind of sit back and choose. Unless they have a clear guy in mind and a team can leapfrog them, they should have the pick of the litter. So, we'll see how that plays out. But what are your thoughts on D'Amico Ryan's? Obviously, having to see him up close twice a year, I'm sure you're actually really excited to have him out of your division.
I am. I'm very excited that he is no longer on that 49ers staff. In today's NFL, I would prefer, like, if it's my team looking for a head coach, I would prefer them looking toward the offensive route rather than the defensive route. But he was one of probably honestly the only guy through this cycle on the defensive side of the ball that if I was a team needing a head coach, I would be excited if he was my head coach, being a defensive mind. Um, I think that as long as he hires the right people around him and then they get the quarterback position right, I think he'll be fine. But I just hope Houston has patience because this isn't a rebuild that's going to happen overnight. And like I've been trying to talk myself into, like, since they didn't get the number one pick, and somebody is going to trade up. In my mind, I think somebody's going to trade up for that number one overall pick. So if their guy goes off the board, I've been trying to talk myself into, like, I mean, they know they're going to be bad. Why not grab like Will Anderson or Jalen Carter and suck for one more year and make sure you
Go in
lock
all
up
in
that number
on.
one pick and go get Caleb Williams in 2024. Like, I've already been kind of trying to talk this into my head for Houston. Um,
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's not. I'm not.
but
I'm not
I
cool with
think
that.
I think that would be fun for that franchise. I really do. I
I'm
don't think
sure
that
it would
they
be fun for that franchise. Would not be
I don't
fun for
think that
me.
they like have to take a quarterback this year because they're still not going to be competitive, even if you put, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or whoever on that team. Like, there's still so many holes. But granted, if their guy at quarterback is there, the person they believe in to be their next franchise quarterback, you take him up
Exactly.
10 times out of
Yeah,
10.
that was going to be my point. Is like, I mean, because like, look, we've both followed the NFL for a long time. We've been covering it now for a few years, and nothing ever goes to plan in the NFL. So I mean, like,
Right.
you could just out of nowhere next year. I mean, yeah, you could draft Will Anderson. He's the second coming of Von Miller. He wins you an extra 2, 3 games by
Yeah.
himself,
Yeah.
and then you're setting you're picking up pick 7 or pick 8 as opposed to
Right.
pick 1 overall. Like, who knows when you're going to have the number 2 overall pick again?
Exactly.
Um, so I think if you identify a guy that you think can lead your franchise, that can be uh, that franchise quarterback, I think you got to go get him. Even to the point to where I think if they really identify that guy as like, hey, like this is the one guy that we'll stand by and stick with. I think they should even make the move up,
Absolutely, they
to
should.
Chicago. So
Yeah.
you can't take anything. You can't make anything to chance in this league because as soon as you plan something and as soon as you plan it, like nothing ever will go according to plan. So it doesn't work like that in the NFL.
No, that's so very true. But I did. This was the this was the one defensive head coach hire that I did like through this coaching cycle. Both because I think it was a good move for Houston and because I'm just thankful he's not the defensive coordinator for the 49ers anymore. So that
Yeah,
was a
now I got to
win-win
deal
in
with
my
him
book.
twice a year. So
Yeah.
that's
If
always
he
fun.
if he gets the defensive personnel that I like, so I mean, I don't feel like the New York Jets regret the decision of bringing in Robert Saleh. Um, and I think it's a very similar situation with D'Amico Ryans in Houston now, where if he can get the personnel that he's looking for on the defensive side of the ball, um, there, even if the offense isn't up to par, that the defensive unit can make leaps and bounds immediately just with the new leadership there in place. Yeah, and to Andrew's point, with him being a former Houston Texan, with um, how well he's done, I think it was a pretty
Not
easy
only
choice
that,
for
but like
Houston. So
his wife is from Houston, their family is from Houston, so it's also too. It's much more not even just about the football team, but it's also about just going home and having a chance to put your roots down where your family's at. So I know that was a big part of it for him as well.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I like that hire for multiple reasons, but I think Houston got it right. They got to be patient. They can't keep canning these guys after 1 year. The roster's not good enough to expect anybody
Yeah,
to come in. Like, Bill Belichick's not going to come in and win with this roster as it's constructed right now.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
they got to be
They can't even tank properly. So how
patient.
how are
Right.
you gonna have how are you going to have the number one overall pick on the line and you convert a 4th and 20 to score a touchdown to tie the game, and then you go for two to win the game, and
That
and
was
you
some
end up
crazy
getting it.
shit.
So yeah, so I mean personally, I'm glad it happened, but that brings us here to our next head coaching hire, of course, just finalized this afternoon, and that is Jonathan Gannon going to the Arizona Cardinals. I know this was something you're probably, raring to talk about because I know you had a question about it. So I'll let you go ahead and pop off.
This is the one head coaching hire through this cycle that I was not the biggest fan of. I know that we talked highly about the Eagles defense all year. I know there's been a lot made of the schedule that they played and things like that, throughout the year, and that part of why they were so dominant was because of the soft schedule they had to play, which is nothing that they can control. But I just why and you I don't want to be too overreactive to one game, and especially one game against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, because not an easy task by any means to have to deal with that. But just watching that game and seeing the corn dog back to back workout and things like that, and seeing how they didn't have to play elite quarterbacks too many times this year, but the times they didn't really work out all that well. And I question if how much Jonathan Gannon had to do with the Eagles' defensive success versus the personnel that they had on the defensive side of the ball, because I mean the Eagles' defense is loaded with talent, and I think Jonathan Gannon did play a part in that. Um, but I just question how big of a part it was versus how much of it was just the talent that was on that side of the ball, and them stepping up and making plays all year long. So I'm not that mad about Arizona being the one to hire him, because I'm obviously going to be praying for Arizona's downfall. But this was the one head coaching hire that I have I have some questions about and I don't feel as good about.
Yeah, I mean, anytime, that's part of it, and that's kind of the catch-22 with being a coordinator or a coach or anything like that is, like I said, like this is a players' league, so you're only as good
Right.
as the players that are on the field. So
Right.
yeah, would he have been successful if there were worse players on his defense? Like, no, probably not. But at the same time, even when you have great players, you have to put those guys in positions to succeed. And I think overall
Right.
that, he did a really good job of doing that. Now, are there some issues? Obviously, yeah, there are. There's some scheme issues. Um, there's some, preparation issues that they dealt with, especially like even going into the Super Bowl, where, I think there were some self scouting issues where they didn't, they might have watched the Chiefs defense or the Chiefs offense, but I don't know if they really did a lot of self scouting because a lot of the plays they got burned on in that Super Bowl were plays that had burned them in previous games throughout the season.
Yeah.
And, if you're able to look back, if you're able to self scout and say, okay, these were the plays that consistently got us, killed throughout the year, there's a good chance that Andy Reid's watching those exact same plays and he's saying, "Hey, this is working. This is working. This is working."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like it seems like there was kind of a lack of that in that game. So yeah, like the preparation part worries me, um, and especially whenever they brought in Vic Fangio for the 2 weeks to help them prepare for that game. It was like, like what were you really preparing? What were you doing? Were you, out making coffee? Were you preparing to hit your 8 a.m. tea time? I don't know what you were preparing to do, but obviously it wasn't a game plan that was successful in the Super Bowl. And I think that's also too part of the issue here, is that Super Bowl and what the Chiefs did to that defense is still very fresh in people's
Right.
minds. So they're grading it. They're not looking at the full body of work throughout the season and the great job that defense did, against multiple teams. What they're looking at right now is, hey, you know, there's quite a few different things I could go into for that, but I mean, people are viewing it through the lens of the Super Bowl as opposed to looking at the full body of work, and I think that's kind
Hmm.
of been one of the biggest issues with this hire, or the fan reaction to this hire. And like I said, are there some things that he should have done better this year? Absolutely. Am I going to knock him for having talent on his defense and being successful with the talent? Yeah, no, I'm not, because there's plenty of people that have talented defenses that aren't successful. Regardless of how much talent.
Very true.
So yeah, I mean it's interesting. I, for one, of course, with Kyler Murray, I think you brought this up. You always tend to, like, whenever you have a quarterback like that, you always tend to want to go offense, and this is kind of where this league is trending, where it's the young offensive minded guys that are coming in succeeding. I believe 7 out of the 8 teams in the playoffs this year were offensive minds, and
Yep.
Sean McDermott was the only one that wasn't. And whenever you're looking at that, and even in that game, the Bills and Bengals game, Zach Taylor, he whooped Sean McDermott. He put a whooping on him. He coached circles around him, and that's just it's the way the league is trending. It's all the teams that have success here recently. That's the way they're trending, and I think having already a quarterback in place to where you're possibly you've already extended him now. They're going to go through a small little rebuild there because of the injury. He's likely to not play at least most of next season. So you're probably looking at another high pick. I think this is an opportunity to really kind of prepare for that future run with Kyler Murray. And if they had a chance to go offense and to get a system installed and get the correct players in there and get these guys some experience, so then whenever Kyler Murray steps in and he's ready to go, you're firing on all cylinders. Then I think that's probably what should have happened. But on the flip side of that, and then I'll leave it be. But on the flip side of that is they also have a lot of really talented pieces on their defense that's really underperformed. They've
Hmm.
invested heavily in their defense over the last few drafts, and they're not getting a lot of production out of that unit. So I can almost kind of see too why it's like, well, we've got Kyler Murray in. He's going to be our quarterback. We know that offense is going to be productive, or at least average. They're at least going to have an average offense. And if he can even bring in a really good offensive mind, you're probably going to have a good offense. The biggest issue with that team has been their defense. It's held them back, and they've invested heavily in it. They have a lot of really talented players, but they have a lot of players that aren't necessarily being used at their proper skill set. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've
Yep.
drafted a lot of like weird type of players that can play
The
safety, players that can
positionless
play
guys.
linebackers. Yeah, a lot of hybrid guys, and they haven't really been used correctly. So I think if
Right.
you get a guy in there that can possibly game plan around those guys and use them in the correct spots they're supposed to be used in, really create more of a dynamic offense, and or not offense, but dynamic defense that can attack and can kind of set back and play coverage in this league where passing is so important, then I think there's a chance for success there too. But it's gonna be another thing where they just got to be patient. Like, I believe they handed out a 5-year deal to him, so
Yep.
it's probably gonna take every bit of the next couple to really get things down. So you just got to stay patient, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's that's why I started off my mini rant by saying that I didn't want to be too overreactive to one game, because if the standard we're holding these guys to is, well, can you slow down Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes, then that's going to pretty much everybody's going to get a failing grade on that one. So um, but it was a little bit eye opening for me. And in general, I just, as I said earlier, in general, I prefer offensive minded head coaches versus defensive minded head coaches, just in a vacuum. So especially whenever you have a franchise quarterback already locked in, or at least somebody you hope to be your franchise quarterback, as Arizona does with Kyler Murray. So it'll be very interesting to see what route he goes with his offensive coordinator. Um, that's kind of where my eyes are at now. As a division rival of theirs, I'm gonna be watching that closely to see what route they go with that. Um, but there's one other coaching change that we haven't talked about yet, right? That I'm assuming you probably saved for last. So I will just let you wet your whistle there, and
Oh gosh. Well,
and
no,
then
because I mean, like
take it
I've
over.
like honestly, like I've talked about it enough today, so I'm actually kind of curious to hear an outsider's perspective on the hire. I want to see what it's like from the outside looking in. So yeah, if you didn't know, if you're watching this and you've just been living under a rock, because I'm assuming you're a Colts fan if you're watching this, or at least most of the time,
We
Louisiana
have a
games
heavy Colts fan base
influence. Yes, we do.
audience.
So, which is great. But so Indianapolis Colts hired their new head coach, finalized it today, and that is Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator of the Eagles, dipping back into the Eagles' offensive coordinator. Well, again, I think we're just trading offensive coordinators every few years. That seems to be the case. So I'm sure they will, here in about 3 or 4 years, if Nick Sirianni's fired, I'm sure they will be stealing the offensive coordinator under Shane Steichen. That just seems to be what we do. Um, but yeah, Shane Steichen's hired, coming off a really strong offensive game plan in the Super Bowl. Put up, a lot of points. And really, like they've done a lot of really good things all year. There's been a lot of he's had success in multiple places now. Obviously, helping Philip Rivers in Los Angeles, and then Justin Herbert, developing
Herbie.
Justin Herbert there. Especially during his rookie season, having him as the offensive coordinator out there was, set a rookie record, 31 passing touchdowns. So, and then obviously, we've seen the work he's done with Jalen Hurts over the last couple of years as well. So, a very strong influence, it seems to be, on the development of quarterback, placing the offense in position to succeed. Really, that was the main issue with the Colts this year was, the defense played its butt off for the majority of the year until, the wheels just fell off. But, yeah, so it seems he's been brought in. He will call plays, so he's going to be the play caller, which I personally like. If you're going to hire an offensive mind, I like for him to call plays. I know some
Yeah.
people don't, but for me, it just makes things a lot easier. Because say you do lose your offensive coordinator, then you're not having to redo an entire offense. It's all
Right.
it's consistent. So and I'm a big fan of consistency. So yeah, that's all I'll say. Like I said, I'm curious to see what you have to say about it.
So to kind of to piggyback off of what you were just talking about, one thing that I love about Shane Steichen is he's worked with so many different types of quarterback. Like not even just listing the names. If you just look at the different types, like with Rivers and Herbert and Jalen Hurts, like could you possibly have a more diverse pool of quarterbacks that have all been successful? And something that we bitch and moan all the time about on here is why are coaches trying to make players fit their system versus making sure that they are making their system fit the player. And that's something that Steichen has clearly done very well, with having to work with these different types of quarterbacks.
Yeah,
So
and that's
I
something he mentioned in
whenever
his press conference today as well. So,
I see, I haven't watched any of his press conference yet.
yeah, so
Um,
he mentioned that in his press conference today about, figuring out what the players do well and then, putting a game plan around your players. Like he even brought not just quarterback, he said, figuring out what routes Michael Pittman runs well and putting him in those routes, and Alec Pierce and like, all
I
these
love
guys. And
that.
I know I heard it. I'm just like, yes, like yeah, I love hearing that.
I don't know if
So,
you're picking. I don't know if my audio is picking this up, but I'm in the middle of Brooklyn right now for work, and there's car alarms going off and shit. So
oh gosh,
if
no,
that's
I haven't heard
okay,
anything. So,
all right, cool. But I love that though. That makes me even more excited. And whenever I saw what the names were coming down to for the head coaching finalists for the Colts, I was secretly rooting and hoping that you guys got Steichen. So I love the hire, and I think that it positioned you guys very well to where now the Colts fans can have faith that whoever the rookie quarterback ends up being, that you guys do bring in through the draft, that your head coach is going to set them up for success and he's going to build around them versus trying to fit them into what he wants to do, which is something that I think is one of, if not the most important things you can do as a head coach. So that was something that really stuck out for me just from his past and seeing the different types of quarterbacks that he's worked with and all of them working regardless of the different quarterback types. So I'm really excited for you guys. I think y'all got it right. I think you nailed it. Um, I'm glad that you didn't end up hiring Raheem Morris because I was starting to get a little annoyed with Jim Irsay because there were all these defensive coordinators that were getting hired. It's like if they fucking take Raheem Morris from us and then all these defensive coordinators that I would have wanted to be the Rams' new defensive coordinator off the board, and we can't hire them now, I'm gonna be a little pissed. And it's weird because there's a big section of Rams fans that want Raheem Morris gone,
Oh
which
yeah.
I don't really understand. I feel like we just are watching two completely different football games. For which everybody deserves to have their own opinion. It doesn't mean that I'm right, they're wrong, or anything like that. But I was very confused to see the Rams fans that were rooting for Raheem Morris to be gone, not because they wanted him to get a head coaching job. Like, hey, we're rooting for you. We want you to get we want you to get the promotion. They're like, oh, please get this fucking guy out of here. And I didn't really understand that, but I was thankful that we ended up being able to keep Morris, so that we weren't having to just like pick through what's left at defensive coordinator because Jim Irsay dragged this shit on for so long. But
Well, no,
I
I think y'all got a pretty good guy in the wings waiting there, and Eric Henderson. I think
yeah,
his time's going to be coming pretty soon. So
yeah, that's something that they do a really good job of is promoting from within and kind of having succession plans in place. But no, I love it, man. It's been one of my favorite hires in this process, and now I'm just really excited to see which guy you guys end up landing in the draft because that's a quarterback I will naturally become, even if I'm not already high on him. I will probably just naturally become a little bit more high on them after the Colts draft them because I do believe in what you guys got going on there at the head coaching spot now.
yeah, yeah, I mean that was this was always kind of the big thing is like for me it was even more a little bit more important than the quarterback hire or not hire. I mean, well, I guess technically you're hiring them, but they don't have a choice in it. So, um, but to me, yeah, this was always kind of like the 1A to the 1B, where it's like, look, if we don't get this coaching hire right, then it doesn't matter which quarterback we draft, who we
Yep.
draft, they're not going to succeed. So that was my big worry with some of these guys. Obviously, the weekends, for the boys, Saturdays, and I'm a big I love Jeff, I really do, but that was always one of my worries. Which over the last couple of weeks, I've kind of like not been worried just because. And I even put it out there on Twitter. It's like, look, guys, like just calm down, calm down. I've been telling people to calm down for 2 weeks. I couldn't really say anything at the time because I couldn't just come out and be like, they're not really looking at Jeff Saturday anymore. But it was so funny that every time there was an interview brought up, it was the national media would then, immediately after it was like, oh, so and so had a really good interview, but Jeff Saturday still considered him though.
Man,
And so,
they
I mean,
kept Jeff's
it was
name in there
God,
to the
dude.
end.
Yeah, I mean, they were pushing, pushing, pushing. And it was so funny hearing that on TV and then talking to some other people that actually had a little bit more knowledge on the Colts search. And they were
Right.
like, yeah, Jeff's not really a legit candidate anymore. Like going in, yeah, like they wanted him to have a fair shot. They wanted him to get an
Yeah.
interview, a chance to pitch his vision and all that. But I would say probably after the second round of interviews concluded, he wasn't really one of those, top 4 or 5 finalists that were in that role. So it was funny having people that actually kind of knew a little bit what was going on in the Colts head coaching search. And like I said, I don't play the insider game, so I wasn't really gonna I wouldn't say anything. Like I would just put like, hey, like everything's gonna be all right, like everything's cool. But then,
Just doing like the Aaron Rodgers
right,
RELAX.
yeah, yeah, relaxed. Like everybody just needs to relax. And then of course, like you turn on ESPN or you turn on them, and they'd be like, Jeff Saturday's the favorite for the job still. And I'm sitting there, I'm
Every
like,
time.
man, yeah. And I'm like, man, these guys don't know a damn thing. So, and that's really how it was too. Because even I tried to get a little bit of info, but I mean, this was a very tight-lipped search, man. It was very in depth, like probably one of the most in-depth coaching searches that I've seen.
Yeah.
Started out with 13 candidates, I believe. Went down to about 7 or 8. These guys were interviewing for they interviewed I think 4 hours over Zoom the first time, and then the guys that made the cut to the second, like I said, there was like 7 or 8 other guys. They were going anywhere from 12 to 14 hours of interview, like in a single day, and I mean, it was super intense. I believe there was like 130 plus hours of interviews that took place total in the last 35 days. So yeah, I mean they were very thorough with it, but it seems like they got their guy. He was one of my three favorites for the job, that I wanted.
So
And
who were I'm just curious. Who were the other ones?
well, D'Amico Ryan's was one, but obviously he never even interviewed with the Colts. But going into the process, I was like, "There's three guys if they get hired that I'm really going to be excited about." One was D'Amico Ryan's, one was Shane Steichen, and the other one ended up being Raheem Morris. But then, obviously, D'Amico Ryan's didn't interview. They kind of pivoted to Brian Callahan with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
So he kind of replaced D'Amico Ryan's in that. So it was really, at the time, it was, Morris, Callahan, and Shane Steichen were the three that I was like, look, any one of these three gets hired, I'm excited for sure. And then just listening to that press conference today, he spoke on a few different things that had me really hype as well. And like I said, one of them was about scheming to your players and putting them in the
Yeah.
positions to win. Like I love that. Then he made a comment in that thing. He said they said they asked him like what's his philosophy and like kind of how he does things, and he made the comment that you pass to score points, you run to win the game. And just hearing that, and I'm like, yes, like that's like he knows like this is a passing league, and you have to
Yeah.
pass the ball to score points. And then once you pass the ball and you've scored points and you have a lead, then you can introduce that run game a little bit more and kind of grind clock. But at the first, it's all about scoring points and passing the
It's
ball
so
is the most
refreshing
efficient
to
way.
hear.
It
It's what
is, and
like versus like the person that's on TV saying like, oh, the
run
team
the
that
damn
runs.
ball, run the damn ball.
Did you know that the team that has 15 plus rushing attempts in the fourth quarter wins the game 95% of the time? It's like, well, why do you think they're fucking running the ball 15 plus times in the fourth quarter? It's because they're already winning the fucking game.
Yeah, because they've thrown the ball 35 times and they've scored 30
Right.
points. So they're on about
Oh, that's
15
that's
points
good
right
to
now.
hear. That makes me feel
Yeah,
even better for you guys.
yeah. So that was really cool to hear. There was a lot of really good stuff. I like if you haven't watched the press conference,
I
go watch
haven't.
it because there's a lot. He starts off. He is a little emotional and thanking his wife and his coaches and all that. Like he named the entire starting offense of the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's getting choked up and he kind of starts to cry a little bit, and it's very raw. It's very emotional, and it kind of got to me a little bit even listening to it because he kind of choked up. He's want to thank my high school coach, because I wouldn't be here without you, and I mean, it was like very emotional. So like hearing that, and you could tell from that emotion to me, like that's what stood out was like how much this game means to him. And anytime you have a guy that's that passionate about the game, and I'm not saying most coaches aren't, but it just kind of hits a little different when you hear that raw type of unfiltered emotion, and you're just
Right.
able to say like, wow, this guy really cares about the game of football. And it was very good. And then he kind of started getting into more, the X's and O's. He talks about his four pillars, and the separation is in the preparation was one of the quotes he used. He's like, well, what separates you from other people is the preparation you put in, Monday through Saturday, and that's what gives you a chance to win on Sunday. And so, just little quotes like that that I'm like,
And that
it's
that's
like
that's that's
it's basically like he was like speaking to me. It was like everything that I say is like he's coming out with, and I'm like, love this guy. I love this guy.
that shit translates regardless of what your profession is. Like
Yeah.
everybody can relate to that. You don't have to be a head coach to relate to that. Like that
That's what's
that's
so great
across
about
the
football,
board.
man, is like a lot of this stuff, and like that's why it's so important, especially like with youth and stuff like that. Is I mean, it teaches you life lessons. It teaches you teamwork and preparation and attention to detail and the ability
Yeah.
to overcome adversity. That's why it's such a great sport, and that's why so many people love it. So, yeah, I mean, that's a great point you made. Like this, all that stuff can apply to your real life as well, not just on the football field. So
Oh
it was
yeah.
a great, you even had the Jim Irsay, I mean, he's just like the great, he's the greatest. candidate that we had. And yeah, he's doing his own thing. Chris Ballard's over there just sitting, just nodding his head, and
Just sitting
I'm like,
there. Yeah.
Jim Irsay even dropped a quote too, because they were talking about, somebody asked a question about like trading up or something, or and stuff, and he's like, Jim Irsay said, he's like, well, we might trade back, and Chris Ballard's like, yeah, that's going to be a quote on Twitter tomorrow, and and then right after he said that, Jim Irsay goes, but that Alabama kid looks pretty good, and I'm sitting there, and
Oh boy.
Oh Jim, he's starting the smoke screens early, baby. He's starting. He's like he's starting the smoke screens early. So yeah, it was a fun interview.
Draft season is going to be a ton of fun this year, man.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. And speaking of draft season, just to plug my other show real quick, if you
Absolutely.
follow us on the Blue Stable, we're doing some great interviews coming up over the next week or so with a lot of the pros, or not a lot, but I mean, I believe there's like 6 or 7 different guys we're doing, and we're going to be recording and interviewing these players and prospects. So keep an eye out for that. The first one will be tomorrow. I believe we have a couple TCU guys coming on. So that'll be really exciting, and I'm excited to talk to these players and prospects. But at the end of the day, coaching changes, they happen. It's you never like to see anybody lose their job, but um,
Right.
Black Monday is one of the worst days. But at the end of the tunnel, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and whenever there's a coaching hire, for the most part, um, there's always hope involved, and that's really what you want as a fan, and that's what you want as a franchise is, just hope, and to
Absolutely.
get out of the situation you were in, because if you're firing your coach, you're probably not in a good spot. So yeah, so now everything starts anew. This is when you really start to kind of rebuild, and kind of to echo the sentiment of what I said, with some of these previous coaches when it comes to Shane Steichen, even, you just got to have patience. Like, this is going to be a
Yep.
process. And I made the comment that this is going to be a little bit of a rebuild for the Colts. They're going to start with a rookie quarterback, a rookie head coach. There's going to be some turnover along the roster. And so I had some people in the comments that were not happy that I called that a rebuild. They were like, the Colts aren't rebuilding. The Colts aren't rebuilding. It's like, dude, you won 4 games last year. You're rebuilding. This is, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how harsh you want me to put it, but you won 4 football games, and you're going to have a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback. And this is a rebuild. This is called a rebuild. It's going to probably take 2 or 3 years for everything to start clicking fully. So, um, uh, regardless, though, I'm excited. I really am excited. I'm excited. You know, we're getting more into draft season. You're going to start your fantasy stuff. So if you play fantasy football and you don't follow Drew, especially in dynasty leagues, I don't know what you're doing because you're not playing fantasy football the right way. So just follow Drew. It's at Drew3MR. His tag's right there. And this dude is one of the best dynasty football minds that I've ever been around. The guy he understands trades. He's just really good at it. So,
I appreciate
even
that.
though, yeah, even though you haven't won our league yet,
I still
he's
can't get
finished
my hands
second
on that
place.
damn trophy, man.
He's finished second place like 4 years in a row, and he just can't. He can't break through.
Can't do it, man.
But I will say this: he's won plenty of other leagues that we played together in. He's definitely beat me in quite a few of the other ones. So, yeah, if you're a fantasy football guy, if you like dynasty fantasy football, please give him a follow over on his Twitter. And even if you're just a fan of football, if you're a fan of Ramsey, if you're a fan of memes, if you like funny stuff, he's a good meme guy. He's got some good ones out there. So
I love mixing some comedy in, man. I can't take this world too serious, especially on the social media side of things. It's just I can't take it too serious. I like to have fun. I like to joke around, and I like to talk. I like to talk sports. I like to talk football. I'm really starting to get into. I'm into like rookie mode, and then I'm also into baseball mode too. Sprinting pitchers and catchers are. I've been seeing some bullpen sessions hitting my timeline lately, so that's getting the blood flowing. So it's that time of the year too. So it's a sad time with football season being over, but this is a fun time of the year for me. So I'm still I'm still excited. The blood's flowing for sure.
Yeah, yeah, same for me. Like I said, we got the combine coming up here at the end of this month. Um, I believe it's like the 28th, I think. So that'll be really fun whenever that starts. And then after that, you got the draft kicking off. That's going to be the end of April. That's going to be going on. So yeah, I mean, things are about to get really busy, but they're about to get really fun. I'm excited. Like I said, we all have hope right now. We all have hope wherever, this season's
That's
ended.
right.
Whatever happened last season, it doesn't matter. This is a whole brand new season. So all 32 teams, except for the Tennessee Titans, you got hope to win a championship. You got hope to win a championship next year. So I'm excited though, man. So yeah, I guess I'll let you close it out, but that'll probably do it for this episode. Unless you got anything else for me.
No, that pretty much does it, man. For you guys that have been hanging out, especially Andrew in the comments was hanging out with us a lot tonight. We appreciate that. We always appreciate the feedback and the
Yeah,
communication, and just letting us know what you guys think on the other side of the screen as well. Um, if you're listening to this, if you've enjoyed it, we would appreciate you if you guys would subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell that pops up whenever you do subscribe, so that you can be notified whenever we do go live or whenever we do post a new video, whatever the case may be. And then, just like the video as well, comment down below. Let us know what your thoughts on the Super Bowl was, what your thoughts on the coaching changes have been, things like that. Just um, so we can continue the conversation in the comments. I like to hop in the comments and get my Twitter fingers working too. So just hop down there, let us know what you guys think. Other than that, we'll continue to bring the content in the off season. It's draft time, it's combine time, things like that. So we appreciate you guys. Andrew, again, thank you for hanging out with us tonight, man. Uh, you guys take
yes, sir.
care,
Appreciate
and
you.
yeah, we'll be back before long. But until then, you guys take care.
All right.